Okay, so this is Edexcel Buddhism, Unit 3.2 Mahayana. This is Lesson 3 Buddha Nature, and this is the resource to create 4 mind maps on Buddha nature, images, and stupas. So we need to create some notes around the sort of theory of stupas, the sort of psycho-cosmic symbolism. We'll explain that in a second. We need to create some notes or a mind map or around the idea of particular stupas in Indonesia, as an example in Tibet, the key example of Mahayana stupas. And then we move on to images. We'll create a mind map of images that are there to teach about the Bodhisattva ideal. That's why that's important, and how it illustrates the Bodhisattva vow and sets up icons of images of transcendence, of sort of glorifying bodhisattvas that are examples to us, inspirations to us. And then lastly, we need to do some notes and maybe a mind map around the sort of deeper theology that images try and convey. Iconography, like Christian hymns, is all about teaching theology, or not necessarily in Buddhism theo, God-ology, but ology nonetheless, talk about the metaphysics, if that's a better word, of Buddhism. So let's get cracking then. Your first mind map, the purpose of stupas, and their psycho-cosmic symbolism in Buddhism. So I've taken this term psycho-cosmic symbolism in Buddhism from this book. I thought this is a great summary of what the purpose of stupas is. Now, remember, this is to be contrasted with Theravada. The Theravada stupa is a very simple thing, perhaps echoing the far distant past. The stupas were just burial mounds, simple domes that marked the burial place of important people. And so Theravada took this up, and they became burial mounds of the Buddha. I think the Temple of the Tooth and the great stupa there, the great stupa at Sanji. And you can go back and look at Theravada stupas. But look at the contrast to this image on the left. Stupas in Mahayana become more ornate, more complex, reflecting Mahayana developing teaching and ideas. So stupas speak of the Mahayana teaching about enlightenment, and each of the steps, each of the little bits represents it, and they're grouped perhaps into 3. We've seen this before. In general, the whole shape vaguely represents the meditating Buddha seated and crowned, but there's more going on than that. And they're symmetrical. If you see it from above, it's a mandala, a pure distillation of the Buddhist Mahayana idea of the universe, the Buddhaverse, the Trikaya doctrine. And that's quite helpful. And stupas, as much as images, teach theology, or better, metaphysics in Buddhism. Okay, so we've got some notes. This term the psycho-cosmic symbolism. Remember, Buddhism is all about what's going on inside the head, as a description of what the universe is, in a way. The universe and consciousness are kind of the same thing in their way of thinking. So let's delve into the psycho-cosmic symbolism of the Buddhist Mahayana stupa. Roughly, I'd like you to notice, in general, it's divided in 3. The lower part, which in the Trikaya doctrine could represent things to do with the transformation body of the Buddha. A middle section, which is roughly to do with the heavenly realm, the Sambhakaya realm, and then the Dharmakaya, ultimate enlightenment, or truth, the ultimate truth, which is the crystal ball at the very top. So as we look at this, we can break it down yet further. Not all Mahayana stupas exactly like this, but there's a lot of this sort of thing going on. Now, so first we go through the stages or steps from the bottom upwards. So the refuges, there are 3 steps. We see this over here as well. We can just see in the background an image of the Buddha overlaid on top of it. But 3 steps representing I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. Mahayana as much as... So I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in his Dharma. Now remember, these are Mahayana ideas, not Theravada ideas. So the Buddha is all that stuff about he's already enlightened, he's much more enlarged idea of the Buddha, cosmic idea of the Buddhaverse, of the Trikaya doctrine. The Dharma, very different Dharma. The Sangha, the Dharma is including ideas like the emptiness, the middle way of Nagarjuna, everything that's therefore interconnected. What comes out of the 12 links of dependent origination. Everything's interconnected. Things are just made of parts. We're just made of parts. The parts are all interconnected. Indra's net. All of those different teachings. And then the Sangha. Mahayana, very different idea of the Sangha. You don't need to be to do this thing of renunciation in Indian Buddha, in Mahayana at least. You just need to be a compassionate being. Take up the Bodhisattva vow. So the next couple of stages revert to typical teaching, enlightenment, so mindfulness, essence, joy. These are some of the 6 or more stages of the virtues, the paramitas. And there's 7 here mentioned. Sometimes there's 10. So these terms get mixed up, but we're talking about referring to Mahayana teaching on the 6 or 10 virtues or paramitas here that lead towards enlightenment. Sometimes these are called bhumis, the 6 bumpas or bhumis. We have the 8 things here to do with the 8-fold path of the Dharmika, the path of right view, right speech, right action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, meditation or samadhi. So we get onto the 10 stages or bhumis of Mahayana and the 3 higher stages of the Vajrayana. Well, that's fascinating. Vajrayana, the 3rd turning Buddhism in Tibetan stupas, what makes them slightly different to other Mahayana stupas is these 3 higher stages. They add yet 3 more things. So this in particular is a Tibetan stupa, which has slight differences with other Mahayana stupas. The parasol represents the 2 wings. Look at the 2 sides, karuna and compassion. Karuna and compassion. We're getting near the top now. The moon underneath the sun is the mind, the heart of love, compassion. The sun then is wisdom. They're both connected. And if you have wisdom and you have compassion, what comes out of that is, well, is purity, is enlightenment. And all of these are represented as well as physically as through color. So typically we have the 5 colors of the Buddhist elements. Remember these 5, the Buddhist flag is often seen as a flag with having 5 colors. Yellow for the earth, blue for water, red for fire, green, and again these track across. So yellow for the 3 refuges, blue for the elements of enlightenment, the 6 virtues, the red for these various general teachings, the 8-fold path, the 10 bhumis, and the higher stages. Think karuna and compassion, and then lastly white, the wisdom of everything. So there's lots here we can say on this symbolism. The purpose of stupas and images in Mahayana. thus is really complex and has deep psycho-cosmic symbolism from the bottom up. The three refuges, the Dharma, the Sangha, the legs of the Buddha, the boom or the dome. Okay, it talks about the four immeasurables of loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. These are these basic things that everybody needs to kind of aim for. The Buddhist chest, the seven elements of mindfulness, discrimination, exertion, joy, pliancy, samadhi, and equanimity. In other words, the six noble truths, the going up again, the harmika, the eyes of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path, etc., etc. The spire or the 13 rings, the 10 levels of everyday Mahayana plus the three highest, Vajrayana or Tibetan kind of, and the parasol, which is compassion, which leads to, and then wisdom, and then finally the heart of awakening, the ultimate point, goal, the ideal of Mahayana. So the purpose of stupas and images, here is an example. This is Indonesia, and this is the biggest stupa in the world, Borobudur. I can't pronounce it right, I'm sure you can look it up better. And it has this gigantic layout. It's enormous. It again has this three stages. You can see the lower stages over here, the middle stages. That's the middle stages, the lower stages, the middle stages, and the top. Here are the heavenly bodhisattvas here in this middle stage. And this would be the earthly realms we go through, perhaps the four, the great Vihar, the great Viharas, the great abodes, full of symbolism. And all around this, if you go and visit it, are relief carvings of stories that tell the Buddhist story. Seen from above, Borobudur is a description of Buddhist cosmology, the Trakeya doctrine, the lower levels, the middle level of the heavenly Sambhakaya realm, and the ultimate Dharmakaya realm. So we live in the world of desires, there's the realm of form, and then there's the formless world, in other words, the Trakeya doctrine. We live our lives in this ordinary realm, the realm of desire. We might get to the Sambhakaya world if we're amazing, and then we get beyond that. The liberation from the cycle of samsara is where an enlightened soul no longer attached to the worldly desire. And it corresponds to this concept of sunyata, complete voidness, the non-existence of the self. If you realize that you don't exist, it's the kind of thing that Thich Nhat Hanh, there's no death because there's no life. Death, you're just a collection of parts. Your name is just a practical designation. And that's what liberation means in Mahayana, the realization of emptiness. Tibetan stupas, and we'll take a break here, much more complex, and they have their three extra stages, just to another Mahayana, adorned with Tibetan prayer flags, which would have the same 5 element colors, and that's got a whole symbolism of its own, Tibetan prayer flags. And there are different kinds of stupas in Tibetan Buddhism, referring to the events of the Buddha's life. So there's not just one kind of stupa, there are different kinds of stupas to remember the life of the Buddha. In addition, in Tibet in particular, stupas can represent famous lamas or teachers. In Vajrayana lineage, the original lama was really important, and so you would build a stupa that would be a place of pilgrimage you would go to as a Tibetan Buddhist. The Lama is an important expression of this belief of emanation. The Lama teacher-student relationship. The teacher passes on what he knows to the student. There's this process of emanation that's happening. Similar to the importance of a guru in Hinduism is the teacher or Lama in Diamond Way or Vajrayana tradition Tibetan Buddhism. Lineage is key, and it reflects this deeper idea of emanation, the three-body doctrine, Trikia doctrine, and emanation from one thing to another, teaching from one person to another as we get others through to the path of awakenment. Okay, go to the next video on the other two aspects.